Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Inna atayna kal kausar wa salli li rabbika wanhar. Inna shani'aka huwal abtar. Ladies and gentlemen, assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon to all of you. On behalf of Director General, Institute of Strategic Studies, Ambassador Azaz Ahmed Chaudhry, and Chairman Board of Governors, Ambassador Khalid Mahmood, it is my pleasure to welcome our distinguished panel of speakers today and the participants who have taken time out to join us for this webinar on the future of Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir under the watch of the United Nations. Ladies and gentlemen, as you are aware, in his speech to the United Nations General Assembly last month on September 25th, Prime Minister Imran Khan noted several factors which are having a negative impact on the global world order. And among them, he identified military occupation and illegal annexation and referred to the Indian occupation of Kashmir. As pointed out in his previous speech in the UN General Assembly in 2019, he again highlighted the RSS ideology of creating a Hindu Rashtra, predicated on subjugating and cleansing India of Muslims and other minorities. Once again, as in 2019, the Prime Minister brought the attention of the world body to India's illegal occupation of Kashmir and unilateral actions to change the status and demography of occupied territories to obliterate the Kashmiri identity in contravention to UN Charter, UN resolutions, and the Fourth Geneva Convention. Such actions, he pointed out, are a war crime, and the international community, he insisted, must investigate these grave violations and persecute the Indian civil and military officials involved in state terrorism. In the context of Prime Minister's speech at the United Nations, it is important to evaluate the future of Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir and reevaluate the role that the United Nations has played for the peaceful resolution and what the future holds under its watch for the acquisition of the right of self-determination for the Kashmiris under Indian occupation. Ladies and gentlemen, with that brief introduction, may I now request Director General, Institute of Strategic Studies, Ambassador Azaz Ahmed Chaudhry, for his welcome remarks. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Najam. May I join Najam in the words of welcome that he extended to you all in this webinar, especially the three speakers, on a theme that has continued to resonate through the halls of the United Nations and outside for decades. But sadly, with no logical end to what the UN had promised to the Kashmiris over 70 years ago. The keynote address of today's webinar is by Ambassador Shamshad Ahmed, with whom I have spent 3 stints of my career in the Foreign Service of Pakistan. All his life, he has worked hard to protect and promote the interests of Pakistan. And all this time, he has advocated the right of Kashmiris to self-determine their destiny. It is our privilege that we continue to learn from his wise counsel. May I also warmly welcome Ambassador Aziz Ahmed Khan and Ambassador Ishtiaq Andarabi, both my respected colleagues in the Foreign Service of Pakistan. This webinar is part of a series of events that are being organized by ISSI, this institute, to follow up on the themes raised by our Prime Minister recently during his virtual address to the UN General Assembly. The first of these themes is about the core issue of Pakistan's foreign policy, the peaceful resolution of Kashmir dispute, the non-resolution of which continues to undermine prospects of peace in South Asia. The Honorable Prime Minister raised his voice over the illegal occupation of Jammu and Kashmir by India, drew attention to this repression of the Kashmiris, reminded the world that India's actions of August 5 are an attempt to change the status of occupied territories, and pleaded to the international community to take notice of the atrocities in Indian occupied Kashmir and enable the Kashmiris to exercise their right to self-determination as per UN Security Council resolutions. Earlier, last year as well, the Prime Minister had effectively raised the voice of Pakistan for the rights of the Kashmiris. Some other world leaders also echoed the Prime Minister's plea to stop Indian atrocities against the Kashmiris and grant them their right to self-determination. We have also seen a stream of voices being raised at various levels, including from within India, especially after the August 5, 2019 unilateral actions by India to change the status and demography of the disputed territories. The question is whether the present Indian leadership, driven by the Hindutva philosophy of RSS, listening to these voices of reason? If not, why not? What then is the future of the Indian occupied Kashmir under the UN watch? What can Pakistan do? And what must the UN and the rest of the world do to alleviate the sufferings of the Kashmiris under Indian occupation and give them their right of self-determination? These are the questions that we would like to explore today through this panel discussion. We do recognize that the United Nations is what its member states make it to be. The saddest part, therefore, is that many nations that claim to be the champions of human rights have turned a blind eye to the gross brutalities being inflicted on the Kashmiris. How is it that the drafters of Universal Declaration of Human Rights stay quiet when they can clearly see what is happening to the people of Kashmir? Is it commercial interests or relations with India? Or is it that they do not see what we all and the rest of the world can see? As the Kashmiris brave these harsh times, they must know that the people of Pakistan stand with them, and so must the people of the world. It is in this context that we at the Institute are fully committed to raising our voice for this cause, and we would surely continue to play our part in this regard. We hope that one day, and sooner than later, the world will listen and give the Kashmiris their right of self-determination, which is not a favor to them, but their inalienable right under international law. So once again, I thank you and warmly welcome you. Back to you, Najam.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, we now move on to our working session of this webinar today. Our keynote speaker today, as Ambassador Chaudhary pointed out, is Ambassador Shamshad Ahmed Khan. Ambassador Shamshad Ahmed Khan is former Foreign Secretary, a career diplomat. He has served on various diplomatic assignments in Washington, D.C., Paris, Dakar, and Tehran. He was also assigned to the United Nations in New York, where he was both chairman of the political committee of the United Nations Council for Namibia and a member of the United Nations Committee on Palestine. Ambassador Shamshad Ahmed Sahab, I would now request you for your keynote remarks. You, sir, have 20 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Najam. Well, my first one of gratitude to my friends and colleagues, Chairman Khalid Mahmood and Director General Ambassador Azaz, for providing me this welcome opportunity to be part of this important event. Thankful for your very kind words And yes, indeed, we worked together for a long time. I always feel proud of that association that we have pursued common goals. But soon we have an important subject to discuss, and we are discussing the future of India's illegally occupied areas of Jammu and Kashmir under the UN. But we escape some ugly, dark reality that in the face. The famous Roman historian Tacitus once said, "They have plundered, stripping naked. They are driven by, they ravage, they slaughter, they seize by false pretenses. And when in their wake nothing remains but a desert, they call peace." Here, so share with you, there are any, are there? No. So share with you who said man was not the problem of the universe, but well, I can hear some noises showing that we do have the desired female presence in the audience. I'm glad. So I repeat,
May I request Shimshad Sahab if you
yes, जी जी फरमाइए, साउंड
के
का
करीब
मसला
हो
है कोई?
जाइए, आवाज ठीक हो जाए, फोन के करीब हो जाइए, अपने फोन के करीब हो जाए तो आवाज बेहतर हो जाएगी जी।
अच्छा, तो so man was not born to solve the problem of the universe, but rather to seek to lay bare the heart of the problem, and then confine himself within the limits of what is amenable to understanding. Prime Minister Imran Khan has appeared twice in the UN General Assembly since he came to power. On both occasions, he has bared the heart of the Kashmir problem, letting the world community know the crux of the Kashmir problem in all its aspects, while also raising issues of global relevance, including corruption, money laundering, development financing, debt relief, environment, and Islamophobia. Imran Khan articulated, and he articulated very eloquently, Pakistan's principled position on the Kashmir dispute. Overall, the centrality of the Kashmir dispute has been the focus of Prime Minister Imran Khan's engagement at the United Nations, drawing parallels between Hitler's Nazi regime and India's RSS, of which Modi is a lifelong member. Imran Khan has been urging the world to stop the Moditwa-led brutality in the occupied Kashmir. Looking ahead, ladies and gentlemen, the challenge for us is to sustain the momentum and to keep the world engaged on Kashmiri's human rights sufferings. Imran Khan has been presenting their case well, but let's move beyond rhetoric now. As Shakespeare once said, action is eloquence. And in the current scenario, we must be realistic in our expectations from the United Nations. We know the reality. So we should come out of the General Assembly speeches euphoria and focus more on action rather than cliches and anodyne hue and cry. We know whatever action our Foreign Office can take, it is already taking. Our foreign service has a great tradition. We all have been part of this tradition. More than anyone else, we are aware of the myriad challenges that our country has been confronted with in its perennial quest for survival. I will urge those of my colleagues who believe, and I hear it quite a lot these days from my colleagues, some of my colleagues, expressing their dissatisfaction with the Foreign Office. So, who believe the Foreign Office is not doing enough, I would urge them to come forward and point out what, in their view, the Foreign Office has not done and what it should be doing or needs to do. I suggest, my friends, the Institute of Strategic Studies in Islamabad should institutionalize a process of regular brainstorming on selected critical issues on which our experienced diplomats can make some inputs. And these issues should essentially be related to our security and survival, including Kashmir, Afghanistan, and of course, disarmament issues. So, having said this, well, I have taken this opportunity to make a suggestion to you, Khalid and Azaz. So, having said this, it is time we woke up to the stark reality that a Kashmiri child born today in Srinagar, and Ishtaq, you should comment on this when you are making your remarks. A Kashmiri child born today in Srinagar, when he turns 5 years old, he will be part of a Hindu majority Jammu and Kashmir. While we remain affixed, totally stagnant in our status quo mode, changes. It is issuing permanent residency to Indian citizens, completing its agenda of settling the Kashmir issue once and for all by bringing about demographic changes in the valley. I must make it clear that I'm not recalling and repeating all those things that we all know about the history of the dispute and what we should have done and what we should not have done. But today, I think we are confronting stark realities, so I'll be very candid. India is buying time. And I must also make it clear that I have been one of the most hardliners, that I never believed that we should ever make a compromise. When Musharraf was negotiating with India, I thought that he was trying to legitimize status quo. And in my view at that time, status quo was the problem. It could not be a solution. So today, I have to become pragmatic. So I'm sharing with you my thoughts so that we can all start afresh in our सोच हमारी जो सोच है उसमें हम कुछ सोचना शुरू करें कि अब हमें क्या करना है in the changed environment. So what India is doing, it is buying time. It should worry Pakistan. मगर हमें कहीं नजर नहीं आ रहा कि कोई हमें concern है किसी level पर. Once the Hindu settlements are complete in Jammu and Kashmir, the Security Council resolutions will no longer carry weight, and their applicability in letter and spirit will just not be possible. If we do not do anything to make India reverse its August 5 decision and restore the disputed status of Jammu and Kashmir, rendering this domicile law null and void, then 5 years from now, there will be no Muslim majority Kashmir left to raise voice for. Well, I've used the time frame 5 years. I'm sure those who are expert in demographic changes, they would work out the more accurate figure. It should also worry the Kashmiris. 5 years from now, Kashmiriyat will dilute, if not evaporate. It will become a diaspora phenomenon. Freedom will no longer be a goal to fight for. The lynchings and dehumanization of the Indian Muslims that the world is witnessing in India at the hands of the Hindu fanatics will also become a norm in the valley once the Bhatts would call it home. The 8 million Kashmiri Muslims in the occupied Kashmir, for whom we want the international community to stand with us in rebuking Mudditwa, will no longer need Pakistan to fight for their freedom in an altered reality which favors India. It will be another Palestine. The question is, are we going to become the proverbial Arabs? Are we so shameless? Kashmir today has two distinct dimensions we must understand: symbolic Kashmir and strategic Kashmir. Symbolic Kashmir is a place where larger national and subnational identities are raged against each other. It is a scene that we are already familiar in Pakistan. The conflict in this Kashmir is as much a clash between identities, between imagination and history, as it is a conflict over territory, resources, and peoples. In the strategic Kashmir, in contrast, the military establishments on both sides of the border insist that Kashmir is critical to the physical defense of their respective countries. India always understood the strategic Kashmir. So did Pakistan. Therefore, both worked towards securing and consolidating their own respective versions of the strategic Kashmir. It is the identities, the imagination, and the history in the symbolic Kashmir which India is now attempting to erase. And Pakistan has left the field wide open for them to march on. And I can tell you that Modi is damn serious in erasing history. 5 years ago, I visited Delhi and Agra, and I saw that the time frame, the names of Muslim rulers, they had all been erased from the historic monuments in both in Delhi and Agra. So on our own part, we have divided ourselves in ethnic and linguistic Rajdhanis. In fact, only yesterday I was talking to Dr. Fay, who was in Washington on the Zoom link, and I shared with him these thoughts. And I told him that at least Kashmiris should rise above these ethnic and linguistic or parochial labels. So Pakistan and Kashmiris do not have the luxury of time at their hands to mount a long struggle against the brutal Indian occupation and annexation. We cannot afford to blindly remain committed to principles while the enemy is already decimating them like dirt. हाथ बांध के बैठे रहे तो कल तक कश्मीर खत्म हो जाएगा जिस तरीके से इंडिया और मोदी चल रहा है जिस स्पीड से और ठीक है कश्मीरियों पर बहुत बिकता है जुल्म हो रहा है लेकिन मोदी को कोई परवाह नहीं और दुनिया को कोई परवाह नहीं कतई नजर इसके कि इमरान खान ने दुनिया के ज़मीर को जगाने की बहुत भरपूर कोशिश की है and he did manage unlike all other rulers in our country. He is the one who has conveyed the Kashmir message befittingly and with conviction, but we should not be euphoric about world conscience. India wants Pakistan to accept the Indian decision of August 5 as faith accompanied, and it is sparing no effort. So it wants to push Pakistan to decide the future of Azad, Jammu and Kashmir, Gilgit and Baltistan, like it itself did with Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. Annex, assimilate, and move on. We have seen the reaction of the international community to the Indian annexation and occupation. Does anyone even care that India is trying to undermine the UN Security Council resolutions through the new domicile laws? Does it matter to anyone that under the law of armed conflict, it is a war crime to transfer population into an occupied territory, the Fourth Geneva Convention? Well, the Secretary General, during his visit to Pakistan in July this year, he did make very positive remarks, and they should have given us heart. But unfortunately, words mean nothing today. When resolutions have lost their relevance, what these hollow words can change? That is a moment of reckoning for us. We must be realistic. No one cares, and it does not matter. If it mattered, India would have been named and shamed at every international human rights forum without Pakistan pushing for it. What should we do then? Should we juxtapose what India did on August 5, 2019, and take the Indian bait? Should we assimilate Azad Jammu and Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan and give it provincial status so that the Indian claim on these two territories, at least the Indian claim on these two territories, is forever laid to rest? Should Pakistan wage a war to liberate Kashmir, irrespective of the costs involved? Can we afford it? Should Pakistan work with China to create difficult circumstances for India, two-front war? In Ladakh, enough to leverage the situation whereby India is bound to reverse its August 5 decision and restore the status quo ante in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Well, I'm a diplomat. So are you, most of you. We have always built bridges and still believe in their validity. But I don't think we can rule out war. If we may not want war, but who knows, it can even erupt accidentally. The way both countries are situated today, I think the only two countries which represent a nuclear equation which did not emerge from the Cold War dynamics, it emerged from a list of outstanding disputes. So the only nuclear equation which faces live disputes. So the risk is always there. That is why the world considers this region as the most dangerous place on earth. So if a war is imposed on us, we have to fight. We will fight. And I think Imran Khan gave a very clear message to Modi in his last year's speech that if a war is imposed on us, we will give you a lesson that you will never be able to forget. And we have no doubt about it because our armed forces are always ready to give that kind of response. So there are no easy answers to these questions. That is the thing. So it is about time that we started an honest discourse on these options, no matter how uncomfortable it makes us feel. Public narrative must be generated on these issues to inform policy. As I look at it, Pakistan's Kashmir strategy can no longer be a top-down approach. We must keep the Kashmiris on board. They are the final arbiters of their future. Woefully, the UN watch is nowhere in sight, except in occasional reports that become part of voluminous archives. The UN is known today to be the largest consumer of paper and biggest producer of waste paper. It is just nothing more than a dustbin of history. It is no longer an arbiter on issues of peace and security. But we must remain engaged with its human rights bodies for whatever work they are. Let's prepare ourselves for our Kashmir challenge. So in that, I would just briefly say what I expect from the Foreign Office is that our two missions, diplomatic missions in the United Nations in New York and in Geneva, they should be more active in generating support within the General Assembly so that we can go to International Court of Justice for an advisory opinion on Kashmiri's right of self-determination. They should be more active to have a resolution adopted in the Human Rights Council. They should be more active in having the Human Rights Commissioner's Office sending a fact-finding mission to the occupied Kashmir. They should be more active in pressurizing the UN Secretary General to appoint a special representative on Kashmir. And I think all our ambassadors, wherever they are, should be more active in generating a consensus in favor of Kashmiri struggle and on the current lockdown suffering and hardship that the Kashmiris are going through by mobilizing the support of the Nobel laureates wherever they may be located. They should be brought together and taken to the occupied Kashmir so that they can smell the gunpowder in the streets of the occupied territories. So thank you very much. I hope I haven't taken too much time beyond 20 minutes. Thank you.
Not at all, sir. You were within your time bracket. Thank you, sir, for those very candid remarks and raising those very difficult and pertinent questions. We hope to look for the answers over our discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, the next speaker on my program is Ambassador Aziz Ahmed Khan. Ambassador Aziz Ahmed Khan is also a career diplomat. He has served as Pakistan's High Commissioner to New Delhi and as Additional Foreign Secretary. He travels extensively at the international level to lecture at strategic security conferences with particular reference to Pakistan's foreign policy challenges. Ambassador Aziz Ahmed Khan, sir, you have the floor. You have 10 minutes, sir, for your comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First, let me thank Ambassador Khalid Mahmood and Ambassador Azaz to have organized this webinar on a very important subject which affects the whole of Pakistan and affects not only the security of Pakistan, but also the heart of every Pakistani. Shamshad Saab has given a very, very erudite and an extensive expose of the situation in Indian occupied Kashmir. So for me, I would just try to confine myself, and rather than being repetitive, I would like to confine myself to a few observations regarding the situation in the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. First of all, as far as the role of UN is concerned, I think he has very adequately talked about the role of the UN. All I can say is that if we look back, the role of the UN has been quite dismal as far as the resolution of Jammu and Kashmir is concerned. The UN has played an important role in the resolution of certain disputes, but looking back, I think if you look at it, it has played an important role where the big powers were interested in the resolutions of the issue. Where the big powers were not interested in a resolution of the issue, like the Palestinian issue or the Kashmir issue, nothing happened. UN could not play any role. Excuse me. In East Timor, the situation was quickly resolved because the big powers were interested there. So this is, at this stage, I think Pakistan, as well as all the important developing countries, should ask the UN and help the UN in looking back at the 75 years of its performance and see, as far as peace and security issues are concerned, how much successful they have been, how much they have followed what was mandated by the Charter of the United Nations. This is something that should be analyzed, should be discussed, and should be discussed at all forums and all think tanks all over the world, because UN is an important organization, and we still need, and it has done some good job as far as socioeconomic issues are concerned. So why has been the performance been not that exemplary as far as peace and security issues are concerned, and particularly the issue of Jammu and Kashmir? I personally feel that Pakistan has a very, very uphill task as far as the resolution of the Kashmir issue is concerned through the intermediation of the United Nations. But Pakistan cannot leave the Kashmiris or ignore the Kashmiris. We have, Kashmir is as Qaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah said, the jugular of Pakistan. And the Kashmiris today, more than ever before, look to Pakistan for helping them in resolving their miseries, in lessening their miseries. It is really heartening to see that despite all the difficulties they are facing, despite such a brutal military occupation with almost 800 to 900,000 military security forces present in that small area, that even today when a Kashmiri is martyred, his body is wrapped in Pakistan's flag. That is an indication of what they expect from Pakistan. Now, what can Pakistan do? There is always, as Shamshad Saab pointed out, a danger of the situation getting out of hand and hostilities breaking out between the two countries. But at the same time, we have to make sure that these hostilities do not flare up, that the situation is contained, and that we keep working towards the peaceful resolution of the issue. Because even if war breaks out between the two countries, finally the settlement will have to be at the peace negotiating table and not in the battlefield. This has been a universal rule as far as such situations are concerned. We have to try, and at the moment, I think the most important aspect for us is to emphasize the human rights violations in Kashmir. The UN Human Rights Commission has spoken very clearly about it. Even in India, there have been protests about human rights violations. Concerned Citizens Group, which is led by the former Indian very important BJP member and a former foreign minister and finance minister of India. The Concerned Citizens Group has condemned the atrocities being committed and human rights violations being committed in Jammu and Kashmir. Today, the situation is so bad that even the so-called pro-India parties, and leaders like Farooq Abdullah, Umar Abdullah, and Mehbooba Mufti, they are protesting the Indian action in Jammu and Kashmir. Leave alone the Hurriyat leaders and other organizations which are in any case struggling very hard for liberation. We need to work overtime as far as the human rights aspect is concerned, and try to persuade the international human rights organization, particularly the human rights NGOs, and particularly these organizations and these commissions in the Western European countries and the United States of America. Because to be brutally honest, these are the countries that matter in the United Nations, and we have to consistently work on them to recognize the situation. And this can be done particularly by sending delegations from our parliamentarians particularly. And I personally feel that the delegation should include articulate people, and and more women members than men members, and they should go to the European Union, all the Western European countries' parliaments, and the United States Senate and House of Representatives to highlight the human rights violations. They all know it, but this has to be a continuous process. Number two, what we can do is to interact with the Kashmiri diaspora, which is large, which is strong, and which is totally in favor of the right of plebiscite in the Indian occupied Kashmir, as far as Kashmir is concerned. And some of them have been very articulate and vocal. At the same time, and they are, most of them are quite well placed quite well established and have access at the important places in the governments where they reside. We can work on these through the Kashmiri diaspora. That would be another important aspect that we need to work on. Number three, we have to be very watchful about the line of control. We see that every day there are violations, several violations per day by the Indian security forces, and they take the excuse of that they are fighting the infiltrators which are coming across Pakistan, whereas the fact of the matter is that that is not so. Because we did the extra step of not firing at the Indians when they were putting up that fence on the LOC, just so that the excuse that the Indians were making about infiltrators coming across, they would not be able to make that excuse. But despite that fence, despite such a heavy military presence, they keep making these accusations. They will keep the LOC hot, but they will keep it just that hot and not beyond that. I personally expect that the LOC might get a little hotter in the coming days because the elections in Bihar are due, and Modi, with his claim about the 56-inch ki chhati, he is going to show, and the only way the thing that wins him votes is that he's tough and he's a strong man. And the Indians, particularly the kind of rebel rousers that are now in charge of government and party in India, are going to be very pleased about it. We have to be very watchful there. India will also use the indirect route of utilizing their proxies inside Pakistan to create unrest and create disturbances. And we have to watch about that also, while being watchful about these things and not lowering our guard at all. And I think our forces have been quite clear about it. And the Chief of Army Staff has said that we will give, and the Prime Minister has warned that Pakistan will give equal and adequate response to any act of aggression. And it was proved last year when the Indian aircraft was down. But we have to be very mindful and very careful. We have to continue our diplomatic effort. And to be very honest with you, all this complaint that one hears that the Pakistani, one hears that Foreign Office is not performing very well. I can assure you that when I was in Delhi, a very important Indian leader, I will not name the person for reasons of propriety, but he categorically wants to, and I had pretty good relations with him, he told me that hats off to your Foreign Office. You people have kept the Kashmir issue alive internationally, otherwise it would have been dead long time ago. So the Foreign Office should continue, be more active, and I think we will be able to deliver, but there is more to it than that. But finally, I would say also, please put your house in order in Pakistan, because we don't give a very good, the way things are happening inside the country, we do not give a pretty good impression to the world. And Foreign Office is like a salesperson. It's only the product that they can sell, and the product should be good. We are presenting a very dismal political image to the world these days, and we need to be strong internally. As Pithas Bukhari Saab said a long time ago, that no ambassador can be larger than its country. So we have to be internally strong to be able to help the Kashmiris, but at the same time, we have to continue and struggle hard. I think I have utilized the 10 minutes allotted to me, so I'll stop here.
Thank you, Ambassador Aziza, for your comments. Like you said, the magic lies in internal cohesion. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker on my program is Ambassador Syed Ishtiaq Andarabi. Ambassador Syed Ishtiaq Hussain Andarabi is a career diplomat with over 29 years of service in Pakistan's missions abroad in Norway and Argentina. with concurrent accreditation to Chile, Ecuador, Peru, and Uruguay. He has also served as counselor at Pakistan's permanent mission to the United Nations at New York from 2001 to 2004, where he represented Pakistan in the Third Committee of the UN General Assembly and the Commission on Human Rights. Ambassador Andarabi, sir, you have the floor, and sir, you have 10 minutes as well.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Let me begin by thanking the Institute of Strategic Studies for inviting me as a discussant at this webinar. It's indeed a privilege and an honor to share the podium with my senior colleagues and diplomats of eminent scholarship, Foreign Secretary Shamshad Ahmed and Ambassador Aziz Khan. I have had the privilege of serving with Ambassador Shamshad when he was a permanent representative, and I know that unlike what people believe, our mission in New York and our ministry has been working overtime to not only keep the Kashmir issue alive, but also enhance the awareness of people about the issue and its severity and its implication on not only the regional but global peace and security. Ladies and gentlemen, few nations in the annals of history have paid so heavily and for so long to attain freedom as the people of Kashmir. They have always resisted the foreign occupation from Mughal to Afghans to Sikhs to Dogras and finally India. Their struggle for freedom has continued in one form or another. Their love for Pakistan just adds to their passion for freedom, azadi, and that's why you see the processions in occupied India carrying Pakistani flags and the shuhada of the movement wrapped in the Pakistani flag, and the people chanting Pakistan se rishta kya, la ilaha illallah. Being a Kashmiri myself, I know that Kashmiris have a very special bond, a special esteem for Pakistan, and particularly since the last 2 years when the Prime Minister of Pakistan has spoken for the Kashmiris at the world's highest forum with conviction, with strength, and with appeal, and drawing the attention of the world community to the human rights violations in Kashmir and others. The history of Kashmir and struggle against India starts from 1947. Confronted with military uprising by the people of Kashmir, the Maharaja under duress had allegedly signed the instrument of accession with India. Its authenticity has been contested by many scholars. Its validity was rejected by the UN when it pronounced that the people of Jammu and Kashmir are the final arbiters of Kashmir's destiny. Now, this point is important because when India took the question of Kashmir to the UN, it asked that Kashmir is a part of India because of the accession. But the UN pronounced that no, it's not the people, it's not the ruler, but the people of Kashmir who are going to decide the future destiny. So that is important, and it was there that the UN said that the future of Kashmir will be decided by Kashmiris by exercising their right of self-determination through a UN organized plebiscite. Since illegally occupying major part of Jammu and Kashmir in 1947, India has applied all the tricks of trade, deceit, duplicity, deprivation, disempowerment, and destruction, and then even appeasement and development, but could not overcome the disenchantment, disillusionment, dissatisfaction, and discontent of the Kashmiri people towards India. They are as alienated today as they were 73 years ago, maybe more now. People in Kashmir are facing systematic violation of their fundamental human rights at the hand of the Indian government. Unrepresentative governance and discriminatory laws have worsened the situation. The revocation of Article 370 and 35 on 5th August 2019 has effectively stripped Jammu and Kashmir of its special autonomous status. Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act 2019 has bifurcated the occupied state into two union territories of India. This has been described by legal scholars around the world as a unilateral annexation which stands in violation of international law, UN resolutions, bilateral agreements, as well as India's own constitution. This makes the presence of Indian government in Jammu and Kashmir as military occupation. Following these actions, India took drastic measures to curb any resistance to the move by imposing a communication shutdown, deployment of further troops, and detention of key political figures. India has converted the area into the largest open-air prison in the world. Introduction of new domicile law by India has created covert implications of demographic change and delimitation that will redraw the parliamentary and state assembly constituencies favorable to the regions that are perceptibly pro-India, such as Jammu and Ladakh, undermining the Muslim majority valley. Shamshad Sahib has very rightly pointed out to this fact that a child born today after 5 years will find himself in a minority. Indian illegitimate and illegal actions of 5 August 2019, while a blatant attack on the dignity of long-suffering people, marks the beginning of an era of unprecedented resistance and struggle toward Kashmir's freedom. This, many believe, is what the Indian leadership says the final solution of Kashmir, which means that they are willing to hold Kashmir till every single last Kashmiri Muslim is killed. And they say for them, Kashmir is important, Kashmiris are not important. It's evident that the movement for freedom has entered its final phase. It's difficult to predict the duration of this phase. There are some signs that it is the last stage of this movement. For the first time in many decades, Kashmiri dispute has received unprecedented attention from the world community. Apart from the 3 informal sessions of the UN Security Council to discuss Kashmir situation, the international human rights organizations have expressed their grave concern over gross violation of Kashmiri people's rights. High Commissioner for Human Rights has brought 2 successive reports on Kashmir. Even in the recent Human Rights Commission meeting, the High Commissioner spoke very strongly against India's violation of human rights in the occupied territories. It's evident that the movement for freedom has entered. So for the first time in many decades, Kashmir dispute has received unprecedented attention. Indian propaganda against Pakistan's institution has been failed, and even major Indian newspapers had to admit that Modi government's last year action had only increased Kashmiri alienation against India while the country has been isolated in the region. Kashmir issue deserves a fresh and comprehensive perspective in the context of rapidly changing global, regional, and domestic realities. This rapidly evolving environment requires an innovative and multidisciplinary policy towards Kashmir issue. For Pakistan, it is important to maintain and strengthen the national consensus on the Kashmir issue above and beyond all social, political, cultural, and ethnic fault lines. This requires proportionate political will that can manifest itself through a timely, regular, comprehensive policy review, evolution of a multi-dimensional roadmap, and strategic plan based on specific policy measures in all domains. Internal governance arrangements of the Federation of Pakistan with AJK and Gilgit-Baltistan should be reviewed. Greater political, administrative, financial, and legislative empowerment, at least at par with the provinces, would induce a lot of confidence and self-assurance to the people of these areas as well as Kashmiri diaspora and Kashmiris on the other side of the line of control. Manifestation and further elaboration of Article 257 of the Constitution of Pakistan through policy formulation and implementation too would allay apprehensions. The aspect of human rights has a great significance in the Kashmir issue. It would remain important. The people and institutions can easily understand and relate that India is mercilessly violating human rights in Kashmir. But the most important and the real issue is the Indian occupation. The internationally settled solution to this problem is the UN-sponsored plebiscite to exercise the right of self-determination by the people of Kashmir. This is the central point in the issue, and centrality of the UN resolution on Kashmir issue should always remain paramount. The role of Kashmiri diaspora and overseas Pakistani is crucial in globally promoting Kashmir issue at all forums, including think tanks, mainstream newspapers, and electronic as well as social media. To enhance UN role in Indian occupied Kashmir, we must engage Kashmiri diaspora, local people, civil society, NGOs to report complaints to the Human Rights Commission, complaint procedure, and special procedure mandate holders like special rapporteur on extrajudicial killing, arbitrary detention, torture, and other mandates. Also, the loss of life and property on the LOC due to Indian firing should be catalogued with full details and submitted to UN Security Council under India-Pakistan agenda item as official UN document, with copies to DPKO and Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights. All the reasonable and fair people of the world should keep an eye open for the prevailing situation in the occupied Kashmir and try to stop the Indian aggression firstly and most importantly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrabi Sahab, for your comments. Ladies and gentlemen, we now move on to our interactive discussion of the webinar. We are open to your questions and comments. You may send us your comments in the chat. And if you wish to raise a question, please identify yourself in the chat and we will give the floor and unmute you. Before we move on to the chat, I already have two questions here for the panel. The first question is to all the three panelists. In fact, these two questions are directed at all our three panelists. The first question is, in case India is able to create a Hindu majority under its new domicile law and goes for a plebiscite just to satisfy the international community, will the UN still oblige? And what will be Pakistan's options and reactions in that case? Sir, the panel. Aziz Saab, would you like to? Shamshad Saab?
I don't think.
Should I repeat the question for you?
I have heard your question. I have heard your question. And since India is already engaged in massive maneuvers to change the reality, ground realities, population realities. So I don't think that after 5 years or 6 years, when India has managed to get a majority, I don't think that that plebiscite will be fair. It won't be, and it won't be legitimate. It won't be legal, and I don't think Pakistan will accept any such maneuvered plebiscite.
Thank you, sir.
I don't have anything to add. I think Shamshad Saab has described, given the answer adequately. So I would just say that we need to continue to work on telling the work against this domicile law. And I think the Kashmiris, even the Kashmiri Hindus, original population of Kashmir, would not like outsiders to have such rights within Kashmir. And this is not confined only to Kashmir. There are other states in India also where such outsiders are not permitted to settle. And this probably needs to be agitated, and agitated through the Kashmiris.
I see Salahuddin Saab, so Ishtiyaq Saab.
I just wanted to make a brief comment on this issue of India agreeing to a plebiscite after it has changed the demographic of the state. I think it's a complex question, as complex as probably the return of Palestinian refugees to the occupied Palestine. But in this case, there is a very important and very strong defense. The right of vote in the plebiscite has to be given to the Kashmiris. And Kashmiri, not only he has to be either born in Kashmir, but his parents being Kashmiri. And I think the law of state subject, which disallows non-Kashmiris in buying and owning properties in Kashmir, which is active, which is operative in Pakistan, but probably it has been eroded in Indian occupied Kashmir. So this is a case that can be made, and this is a case that can be fought against. But I think that the basic idea of India giving domiciles and changing the demographics is not important right now, from the viewpoint that it will take probably another generation or two to really have the impact of this demographic change over the outcome of the plebiscite. And India will, even in that case, it will not be very willing to go for a plebiscite in a vote that it knows that it's going to lose.
Thank you so much, Andra. Wanted to raise a question or make a comment? We have unmuted you, sir. Please go ahead. Salahuddin sir.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. Najam Saab, thank you so much for giving me the chance to speak after a long time. I'll raise a question. Action is eloquent. So rightly, Mr. Shamshad Ahmed Khan has placed before us his views so very frankly and candidly. I've not heard such extremely candid and frank views for a long time. I've been wondering myself for a long time how people have been talking about speeches, the eloquence of speeches, the metaphors, the innuendos, and the similes, and the hyperboles of different kinds of speeches given at different forums of the world. And I was wondering, like, why we suffer from inaction. And I'm so very grateful, Mr. Shamshad Khan, that you have opened our eyes, that we have to be down to earth and work on the ground realities. In this context, I'd not like to go on and on. I could do that for a cause, but I'm not a speaker. I'm just to raise a question. I've been wondering, I'm throwing this thinking, a thought to all of you. I've been wondering, it's like a lament. And to follow up from action is eloquent, I would like to also, highlight Shakespeare's Hamlet when he said, to be or not to be, that is the question. So here is my lament. Why we suffered from inaction for good 2 months after Narendra Modi or his government had made a reference or an announcement about 2 months before the actual annexation and the placement of Article 370. It was on 5th of August that the declaration was made. About 2 months ago, there was, of course, some kind of an announcement or reference made regarding their work on going to annex, IOK. Why have we remained inactive for good 2 months? And this is my lament. If we had acted at that time, probably you could have highlighted the points and the illegal action that the Indian government was making that very moment. So this is my question. I'll be very grateful to hear your views on this. The 2 months of break why you took no action, didn't even think about it. Thank you very much. Mr. Shamsabad Khan, I would like to hear from you first. Thank you.
Yes, Salaudin, pleasure seeing you after a long time. And thank you very much for your words. You have raised a very pertinent question. In fact, for me, the problem was not that we did not react for 2 months. The problem was that we ever accepted Article 370, 35A in 1940. The day Modi took this decision, 5th August, we had a meeting in Lahore of retired bureaucrats and retired civil military people in Lahore. So everybody was condemning India's action and expressing anger and frustration on our own complacence. And when I came to speak, I said that I think this is a blessing in disguise. We don't have to lament that why India has acted in this way. We should be thankful that at least after 70 years, the world can now see India's aggression naked. Otherwise, India had managed with the help of those Kashmiris who were pro-India. I don't have to name them, but their children and grandchildren are still there, raising Gupkar declarations and slogans. The same people are there. So it was the same people who helped and abetted India to put a curtain on its aggression. And that's how India managed to satisfy the world that, look, we have committed no aggression. Kashmiris have accepted. And so we have given them autonomy and they are free to decide their affairs. And for 70 years, India managed. And here, Modi made the mistake. It was a mistake for Modi, I tell you. Otherwise, if India could have continued with that situation without any problem, nobody would have reacted. But this was finally an opportunity for us. And I'm glad, yes, we were slow in reacting. And even after reacting, we have not taken full advantage. Our political leaders are slow, in fact. So the problem is that now we had an opportunity and we have taken advantage of drawing the world's attention to India's brutalities, aggression, all that. So the world now is reality. So I don't think there is a need for us to lament on this 2 months delay. We should be grateful for the action that he took so that Imran Khan's job became easier and he sent a message across the world loud and clear. So I hope I have made.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anybody else's response, please?
Sir.
Yeah, as a Kashmiri.
Sir, I have another question here from one of our participants, and the question is, and this is also directed to all our three panelists. The question is, in post-August 5, 2019 scenario, we have observed that India has started lawfare against Pakistan on the Kashmir front. How Pakistan may counter this Indian attempt, and what are the options available on the international forum in this regard?
क्या correct?
Sir, let me repeat the question. In the post-August 2019 scenario, we have observed that India has started lawfare against Pakistan on the Kashmir front. How Pakistan may counter this Indian attempt, and what are the options available on the international forum in this regard, in terms of
Law,
lawfare? Lawfare.
ये क्या है lawfare क्या होता है मुझे
Sir,
ये नई term है.
Let me come in, sir. I think whoever has asked this question needs to distinguish what lawfare actually means and how it pans out. What India is doing is that it is changing the laws within its constitution by abrogating the special status, by abrogating Article 35A, and doing whatever it needs to do to ensure that demography of the Indian occupied Kashmir is changed. Now, that's an internal lawfare. Then there is an external lawfare, which is whether the international legal systems and institutions can be mobilized to build a case. I don't think India wants to go outside. In fact, India is hesitant to go to any international forum with regard to Kashmir. And that also answers the very first question that you asked. India is not interested in going outside. I think the lawfare part is with regard to the net that India is building against Pakistan through financial action task force, through UN listing process, through other means. And I think this is my sense. Our government has gotten a good handle of that. I think we are ready to counter that. We probably need to put more ideas into it. As Mr. Shamshad Ahmed Khan had just pointed out, that perhaps we need to make greater effort to find a way to take the matter to ICJ or to ICC or to some other international forum to expose India better. I also would like to make a little comment on this, on what Mr. Salahuddin Chaudhary said. I fully agree with Ambassador Shamshad Ahmed Khan. I don't think that India is in any comfortable position after August 5, 2019. Look at where it is now. The Indian face is totally bruised outside. Even Indian diaspora is speaking out loudly against it. Could you have even imagined that the House subcommittee on Asia Pacific of the House Foreign Affairs Committee would actually convene a briefing on India's violation of human rights of the Kashmiri people? And look at their economy and look at the mishandling of the COVID. I think Mr. Modi has made a big mistake on August 5, 2019. We never recognized that step to begin with, but we know that that India's entire approach of Hindutva-driven ideology for the future of India is going to be a very tough ask for India.
Well, legally, if I may just make an observation here, legally, India has committed a blunder in the sense that they have violated the provisions of the UN resolutions, as well as the Simla Agreement, which both say that neither party would alter the situation on the ground. Now, the situation on the ground has been altered. And I think this is a legal question that needs to be examined to see what legal recourse can be taken to challenge these actions of India. Of course, some of these this particular August 5 action has been taken up by some parties as far as the Indian Supreme Court is concerned. But my own feeling is that just like the Babri Masjid decision, which out recently, India and Supreme Court have total disappointment as far as this concern is also concerned. They are not going to uphold the law. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. I have another question here. And the question is how the killing of.
Awaz.
Can you hear us? Can you hear me, sir?
Not clearly.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. The question is how the killing of a Kashmiri advocate Babar Qadri, who refused to chant Pakistan Murdabad by Raw, has been highlighted in the media.
I don't know if everybody has seen that.
Which media are they talking about?
I think there was a clip in Indian media that Arnab Swami, who is he forced this Kashmiri to chant Pakistan Murdabad. He did not. And he, in fact, he said Hindustan Murdabad, and a day later, the Indian intelligence or whoever killed him. So that's the question about that, whether how is it that in Pakistani media it has not been highlighted? Is that I think the question?
Well, we can, and I don't think that we can try it.
This is something, media is independent. So, I mean, it's not for us to put these things in the media. So much is happening actually local. I suppose because of all the reporting on the local shenanigans that we have in the country, this important aspect got ignored by the media.
I think is to ask questions on Kashmir issue as such instead of these one
exactly.
incident.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
Here's another question, sir. With the rising Hindu nationalism in India, is there any possibility of peace in South Asia region, and what measures and options are there for Pakistan to ensure peace and stability in the region?
Who? So,
I answer.
Who would, please go ahead, sir.
Just briefly, that Pakistan's very presence in the region is a factor of stability in response to India's belligerence and its perennial threat to the security of other countries.
Thank
We
you,
do.
Thank you, sir.
If I may just add, what India is doing in the region now. Today, India has problems not just with Pakistan, but also problems with all its neighbors, with Bangladesh, with Nepal, even probably Bhutanese poor people cannot protest very strongly, but even they are not particularly happy, and of course with China. So this rise of Hindutva and this new personality that RSS is trying to find for India is going to be detrimental for India itself. I am quite convinced of that. They have suffered economically because of that. Look at the demonetization policy that they had and how it has boomeranged. They have all the tough actions that they have taken. Nepalese, who have such a close, the only Hindu state in the world who had such close relations with India, today do not have good relations with India. Same goes to all the Indian neighbors.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Our last question for the discussion session, and the question is, as Pakistan is mulling over making Gilgit-Baltistan a province, can Pakistan do so without compromising its standing stance on the larger Kashmir dispute in the international forums like the United Nations? And whether Pakistan is now in a position to change its stance on Kashmir vis-a-vis India?
I think all three panelists.
This is directed to all the three panelists.
Let me
So,
answer
Jasa, would you like to? Yeah.
Ji
that
Shamshad.
it is a hypothetical question that is Pakistan going to Pakistan. But in case now, hypothetically speaking, if the state of Pakistan comes to a conclusion that it has to take similar action as India has taken in Kashmir, in occupied Kashmir. So that is one question that I raised in my own initial remarks, that we have to give serious thought to all these options and possibilities. Now, this gentleman has asked this question. I can't answer this because it is a question for the state of Pakistan. And now the state of Pakistan obviously has a responsibility and obligation to the state itself, to its own survival as a state. If the state comes to a conclusion that Gilgit-Baltistan has to be part of Pakistan as a full-fledged province, and it is absolutely necessary for Pakistan's survival because of the current security environment with India, China uh, standoff going on, well, then Pakistan will have no alternative but to take the Kashmiris into confidence and take a decision. I think every decision has to be based on this consideration, overriding consideration of survival, security and survival. And the Kashmiris will be taken into confidence, I'm sure, and a decision will be taken which is in Pakistan's national interest.
Thank you, sir.
Well,
Any of the other panelists?
If I may just add,
Please go ahead.
as far as Gilgit-Baltistan question is concerned, first of all, this has to be legally, very seriously legally examined as to what would be the implications, number one. Number two, the people of Gilgit-Baltistan, and I have some experience of having visited Gilgit-Baltistan a couple of times. The people of Gilgit-Baltistan feel neglected. They feel that enough has not been done for them. They want to have a separate status as a province. Having said that, well, perhaps, I mean, I'm not a legal person, so I cannot give a very legal argument, but I think personally that if Gilgit-Baltistan is made into a separate province, or we should call it as an administrative decision subject to the final settlement of the question of Jammu and Kashmir. Just like we have issued a new map in which we have shown the entire state of Jammu and Kashmir as part of Pakistan. And we have written with that subject to the final settlement of the Jammu and Kashmir issue under the UN resolutions. So I think it's something which has to be examined legally. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. And Ishtaq sir, you wanted to
Yeah.
answer that?
In fact, this needs to be seen that the two issues or two developments, India scrapping 370 and taking over the autonomy of the state, taking it away, and then making it union territory, one thing, and Pakistan envisaging to give a status of a province to Gilgit-Baltistan are two different things. In India's case, the only link between India and Jammu and Kashmir was the alleged document of instrument of attestation, annexation, as accession. When that has been cancelled, that means that the legal link between India and Jammu and Kashmir has ceased to exist, and now India is there as an occupying force. This is what a large number of Kashmir diaspora, including lawyers and political activists, they think. In case of Pakistan, Gilgit-Baltistan is being given the status of province with all the administrative, legislative, financial powers at par with other provinces. And this has been categorically said that it is a provisional arrangement. And it would be recalled that on all uh, um, the agreements that Pakistan had on Kashmir, this has been this provision has been there, like the exchange of territory in Gilgit-Baltistan between Pakistan and China. the agreement that was signed and after the area of exchange, it was written that this arrangement is provisional to the final status of the Jammu and Kashmir. So we never say that this is going to be a permanent thing. We always say that it's a provisional thing pending the final settlement of Jammu and Kashmir. That is the language which UN also accepts on the maps and other documents regarding Kashmir.
Thank you, Andrabi sir. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our interactive discussion session. I would now hand over the floor to Ambassador Khalid Mahmood, Chairman, Board of Governors, Institute of Strategic Studies, for his concluding remarks. Sir.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First of all, I want to express my great pleasure at meeting virtually old colleagues, old friends, Ambassador Shamshad, Ambassador Aziz Ahmed Khan, and Ambassador Ishtaq Andrabi, and also Mr. Salahuddin Chaudhary. The theme of this virtual seminar is we are viewing it in the context of the speech by Prime Minister Imran Khan at the UN General Assembly session to mark the 75th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations. The Prime Minister gave a very comprehensive statement covering all the live international issues at the moment. Climate change, debt relief to the developing countries affected by COVID-19. But he particularly focused on the scourge of Islamophobia, and in that context also brought to the attention of the international community India's treatment of, rather mistreatment of Muslims in India, and also the plight of the Kashmiri people in the Indian occupied Kashmir. Now we are talking here about particularly focusing on the occupied Jammu and Kashmir, or the broader question of, in fact, of Kashmir. So we are all very informed audience. We all know the genesis of the dispute and how the matter was brought to the United Nations, and how United Nations prescribed a solution to this problem. Solution was that the accession of Kashmir will take place to India or Pakistan in accordance with the wishes of the people of Kashmir, to be determined through an impartial plebiscite to be conducted under the UN supervision. Now those resolutions have been reaffirmed time and again. In fact, there are, I think, about 28 such resolutions of the Security Council. But the struggle of the people of Kashmir has waxed and waned, but it has never vanished. And it has kept on rekindling time and again. And so has persisted the unabated oppression by the current occupying power, India. But this Kashmir dispute has entered a new phase following these 5th August 2019 action by India, which sought to abolish Kashmir's special status and autonomy, and then following measures to change the demographic character of the territory. We all know this is all in violation of international law, that is the Fourth Geneva Convention, relevant United Nations resolutions, the Indian Constitution, and bilateral agreements even, Simla Agreement and Lahore Declaration. You see, as I was saying that, and it has rightly been pointed out during this discussion, that whatever may be the, one could have criticized the Indian action, but one thing which it has done for the cause of Kashmir is that it has again internationalized this issue. There is renewed, as the Director General pointed out, that renewed attention being now given to this dispute by various international organizations and non-governmental organizations, parliamentarians, and so on, and the media. In New York Times, Washington Post, Guardian, all are writing about this current situation in occupied Kashmir. So this is a plus point, and we have to cash upon it. How? There have been many suggestions made. All need very serious attention and analysis. One thing is clear, that we have to sustain awareness of this dispute in the international community. We have to build upon the momentum generated by the successive reports of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. And rightly, it has been also suggested that we should examine whether we should seek advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice. And I would add, even the avenue of International Criminal Court should also be explored, particularly in the context of the responsibility to protect the doctrine of the United Nations. And Secretary General of the UN has shown some sensitivity to this dispute. And of course, under Article 98, it is his responsibility to bring this matter to the UN Security Council. But at least he can appoint a special representative to follow the situation. But I think we should not give up on persuading or working on the permanent members of the Security Council. Their interest has, since 1948, got diluted in support of the Kashmir cause. But in this age, the role of the civil society should not be underestimated. I think the policies of these governments can be influenced by how the people of those countries feel about any particular situation. So we should keep on working on the permanent members. Before concluding, I just want to give my views on this issue that given the present situation, the constraints, should we change our basic policy of supporting the right of self-determination or the plebiscite in Kashmir? See, here I am reminded of what the Chinese told me once, when I was ambassador there. I met the defense minister there at that time. He said, Mr. Ambassador, you were colonized by one country. and we were colonized by a host of colonial powers. And our situation at the time of the revolution was no better than what the position, our situation of Pakistan is. So we adopted this approach that we will not give up on our principled position, come what may, but we will modulate our policy so far as any kinetic action is concerned. And of course, Chinese do not impose their viewpoints on it, but they say this is our experience. And now that China is growing up, had stood up, the people are now listening to us. So I think this is a great lesson in this. They say, we waited for 100 years, more or less, to reclaim Hong Kong, but never gave up its position, even when we were down and out. They claimed Macau. They have not given up on Taiwan. They have not given up their position on the border with India. So I think the lesson is that first we have to become strong if we want our viewpoints, our views to be listened and appreciated by the international community. But at the same time, do not give up or show any flexibility so far as the principles are involved in this situation. So I think this seminar was very useful because it has thrown up many ideas, and it has also given an opportunity to reiterate Pakistan's commitment, abiding commitment to this cause. And that is another matter, how we pursue it. In my personal view, the situation is a little bit better than before 5th August 2019. And we act both domestically and internationally with ever greater commitment and support. And inshallah, our goal of realization of the right of self-determination of the people of Kashmir will become a reality sooner or later. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been, like Ambassador Khalid Mahmood said, a very interesting and fruitful webinar today. It has given us a lot of ideas and themes for future webinars on the same subject, which we hope to organize later. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our eminent panel of speakers, Ambassador Shamshad Ahmed, Ambassador Aziz Ahmed Khan, and Ambassador Ishtiyaq Andrabi for taking time out to come and share their views at this webinar. And I would like to thank the participants for having joined us at this webinar. We hope to see you on our next webinars, inshallah. Stay safe and Allah Hafiz. Assalamu alaikum.